Hello, people of the internet and ClueConners. Welcome to another episode of ClueCon Weekly. I'm your guest, John Gray, and today we have ClueCon personality, MC, and now acclaimed author, David Duffett. David, welcome to the show.
Well, hello there, and thank you for that fancy introduction, John. I'm pleased to be here.
I know the list goes on, but if people haven't heard of you now, they must be living underneath a rock. But one thing that I wanted to talk about now is the last part of your intro, acclaimed author. So you have a book out. What is up with this, and how has life been publishing Be the Nerd That's Heard?
Yeah, I certainly do have a book. And look, I've got copies of it here. Not
There
only the paperback version, but there's the jolly old hardback version or hardcover version in there as well. Yeah, it's been a long journey because I first had the idea to do it back in 2014. But I'm not the world's fastest writer, nor do I get a lot of joy out of writing. It's not really my thing. However, being at places like ClueCon and Astricon in the past and all sorts of other conferences around the world, I've seen so many great technical people that are really nice people and they really know their stuff. But sadly, knowing your stuff is not enough when it comes to communicating it to other people. And one of the technical challenges, the technical temptations of the techie is to unload all of your stuff to the people you're talking to rather than the relevant part of your stuff. So, as I say, knowing your stuff is not enough. It's the ability to convey just the relevant part, not all of it, in a way that your audience can receive, digest, and implement that will set people apart. And I just came to the conclusion, having seen all of these wonderful technical people, really nice people, knew their stuff, but perhaps I thought some of them needed some help in getting the word out there a bit.
No, as we all do. 11 years is a long time to write it. So I appreciate you finally getting it out there because I did enjoy it. I admittingly am only about halfway through, but I was sick a couple days ago and I was able to lay down and, you got me through the sickness. But I think that communication is definitely something that we all struggle with and something that we can all benefit from. And especially being in the techie world, I know off the bat, I struggled with that so much. Just not only being nervous, I still kind of do, but bringing things down to the level that your audience can kind of understand. And I think that was one of the big parts of kind of just like the plan method of understanding your audience and understanding who it is that you're talking to and bringing all the things that are crazy going on in your brain down to a level that people actually understand or things that they actually want to hear. So that kind of leads me to asking about maybe some success stories. I know not only yourself as being a very accomplished communicator and personality across all the different conferences, but what is something that is in your book that maybe you've seen kind of in the real life, or if there's you don't have to mention names about how terrible or rough that they were, but what's like a real life example that you've seen kind of come out of it?
Well, one of the generic thing that tends to happen with technical people is they think that they're scared of speaking in public. And so they've got an idea that they want to talk about, or they've got a success story from something that they've done. So they shiveringly or reticently make an application to speak at somewhere like ClueCon, and then they get the confirmation through, and it throws them into a bit of a tizzy because they're not sure what to do. And my thesis is this, John, that people are not generally scared of speaking in public. They're scared of being ill prepared in front of a group of people because it's a highly embarrassing situation. And so one of the things that I've been able to do is help people organize their thoughts, because they've got it all in here, but it's a kind of it's a case of not trying to just vomit it all up on people. It's a case of putting it in an organized way that makes it easy to receive and digest. And so some of the successes I've had is really just helping people organize their thoughts, and that's what you alluded to in the plan protocol that's in the book. One of the 7 power presenting protocols is all about getting things in a structure and an order to number one, allow people to kind of get what's in their head down on paper or in a diagram or on some online tool. But more than that, that's just the organization of the information. that then fits in, it keys in to a structure of a presentation that takes advantage of people's attention spans and the way that we remember things, the way we get things and file them away into people's memories so that they can recall them as they need to.
Yeah, and one of the other protocols that I really wanted to draw attention to is the last one of just evaluate and kind of evolving. Something that is really tough for me is looking back and like re-watching myself talk. You know, I think it's so icky, and I look back and I just realize how uncomfortable that part kind of is. Do you have any tips on how to look at yourself to be less icky or get across that line? Because I think that planning it out, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll write some stuff down, but it's like almost painful for me to want to have to rewatch or evaluate myself on some of those.
I know exactly what you mean. In the old days, before we had a lot of video, it used to be like that when you recorded yourself on just an audio tape recorder, didn't it? And when you heard it back and you thought, oh, I don't like that. And yet, of course, the tape recorder has captured how everybody else hears you. The way you hear yourself is affected by your bone structure and all that kind of stuff. And so when you watch a video of yourself, that's the way that everybody else saw you. And it is difficult. But part of the work of being a great presenter is actually pushing through that. And to use some American phrases, is sucking it up, John, hunkering down and just getting on with the job. Because if a presentation is worth giving, and if it's not worth giving, why are you giving it in the first place? But if it's worth giving badly before you can give it well. And so really that icky part should be when you're doing it to family, friends, or helpful colleagues that want to point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
So that when you come to your actual target audience, it's not so icky.
No. And seeking the the feedback from others is definitely something that I try to do. It's tough to find those people that are the right focus group, for me sometimes is kind of where I've found it. And no, that kind of, oh no, sorry, what were we going to add to that?
What I was going to say, well, is everybody can give you something, even if the people that you're doing it to doing it with know nothing about the subject matter. They can comment on your style, can't they? But ideally, it's finding people that know your content and you well enough to be able to give you constructive feedback on both the content and the style of delivery.
Yeah. And kind of on the topic of audience, especially on some of these techie talks, it's really difficult to get engagement. Not only are people kind of shy or coy about presenting but they're also sometimes really tough to kind of engage. And I know that, sometimes you'll give out free things or ask questions to the audience, trying to get like a little bit back. But, every medium is different, whether you're kind of in person or, if you're in a video conference and everyone is muted and, in different parts of the world, and you're like, does this sound good to everybody? Do you guys understand? And some of that is really tricky. So that was one of the sections of the book that really resonated with me. But all in all, that is still always going to be kind of a struggle, is getting that during presentation kind of feedback and kind of getting the audience, to kind of engage. I don't know if you have any 2 cents or tips on just engaging the audience to be a little bit more excited about the content that you're talking about.
You've covered a lot of things in what you were saying there, John. There's a few different angles to think about this. The first one is the kind of audience you've got, because it's important to know your audience and the kind of people that they are. And if you're in a conference situation, you can't always judge that. And so you need to take some guesses. So, for instance, if I was speaking to a group of engineers, I could make the sweeping generalization that they're more likely to want to learn by doing, and so they might want to be more active in participation. On the other hand, if I was talking to a bunch of CPAs, accountants, then I might make the sweeping generalization that they're the kind of people that like to take some information in first before they do anything else. So there's the know your audience kind of element. But then there's also the fact that when you start a presentation, you might be a little bit nervous. The audience might be a little bit reticent about what's going to happen. And so you've got to make things easy. And so when you're looking to engage an audience with participation, the last thing you'll you should do is jump right in with some deep question where you're asking an audience member to bare their soul or share their experience about how
Yeah.
well they know this particular technology. You're much better off starting easy. Like, I'm here to speak about bananas. How many people like bananas? And get a few hands up. Or, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you feel that your current software solution fits with what you need to do? You ask them easy questions to start with,
Yeah.
because you need to ease into things. And it's only when you've broken down some of those barriers and got a proper rapport relationship, to use a technical metaphor, when you've established the right amount of bandwidth with your
Yeah.
audience. So you've got that connection.
Mhm.
Once you've got that connection, not only will your information transit to them more effectively, but you'll be able to read the signals coming back from them. And then using that, when you can go a little bit deeper and ask more meaningful questions.
Mhm. No, I like that approach because you see that all too often where someone throws out a very philosophical, huge question, into the world. What's the consciousness behind AI? And then everyone's like, oh, okay, I'm not going
Yeah.
to raise my hand to answer that one.
Yeah, let me jump in and give you a real life example from the Duffett case books here. I was
Mhm.
a member of an audience in a presentation in either Miami or Fort Lauderdale, Florida once. And the guy who was speaking said, who uses this particular technology? And a few hands went up, and he walked over to one of the people and stood over him almost like a Nazi interrogator and said, all right, what do you use it for? How long you been doing it? How well do you know this particular library? And
Yeah.
I thought, this is now stopping any future participation in this talk,
Mhm.
because nobody's going to want to put their hand up in case they get a similar sort of interrogation. And that's exactly what happened.
That's
There was no further participation. It got shut down. And what that was either an inexperienced or a nervous presenter who was using the opportunity when somebody raised their hand to kind of put the focus on them to take it off him.
Yeah.
And really, you need to work hard to establish that rapport, that channel with the audience. And coming back to the protocols in the book, the very first one is purpose, establishing the
Mhm.
purpose of a presentation. And it's not only about establishing it, it's about agreeing it with the audience before you ever meet them. Now, again, you can't always do that in a conference scenario because you don't know who's
Yeah.
going to show up. But if you're going to give a demo of some software next Tuesday to a company in New York, you can surely email them or ring them up. And so I'm coming in next week, and I was thinking of covering A, B, and C and going into a little bit more detail of D. What do you think? And now you've opened the rapport channel. You might not have grown it, but you've
Yeah.
actually opened it up to start communicating. And when you send them an email with a list of the things you're going to cover and let them comment on it, you're gradually growing this rapport channel before you even meet people.
Mhm. No, I like that approach because at least then you understand and you can plan a little bit in your head what it's going to be like.
Yeah,
All too
absolutely. But
often.
one other thing just to jump in on there, John,
Mhm.
and that is, so if you can get to the audience before the presentation, then do some work and agree things with them. If you can't, and thinking of a conference scenario like ClueCon, when people come out on stage at ClueCon, one of the great things they can do is pop up the agenda and say, look, I'm thinking to cover this, this, and this. How is that for everybody? Now, very unlikely that anybody's going to stand up and go, no, that's totally wrong and inappropriate.
I know.
Everybody's going to nod their head and say, okay. And that might seem like a pointless exercise, but it's not. That's a micro commitment. And you're now doing things with people that they've agreed to rather than doing something to them.
Mhm. No, and I like that because all too often I'll get lost in presentations, as an audience member where I'm like, where is this kind of going? But laying out the scene and kind of drawing it back to a more bigger picture, kind of telling people what they're going to get out of it, I think has been something that has boosted a little bit of engagement in some mediums or pieces that I've kind of kicked out. Um, out of curiosity, how did you get the knowledge for this book? Is it a lot of mostly just experience? How did that experience kind of start? And is that why it kind of took 11 years? Or where is it that you learned some of these techniques? A lot of just trial and error?
Yeah, well,
Um,
let's get it out of the way first. The 11 years thing is really just because I'm slow at writing, and and it's not really the thing that floats my boat.
a
So,
case study? Okay, I'll
um,
I'll pretend that. We'll edit it out then.
Yeah,
No.
no problem. No.
5 years.
But where it all comes from is, yes, many years of experience. If we go back to the now, what would it be? It would be very early 90s. I got a job, a regular old job for the Civil Aviation Authority, a bit like your Federal Aviation Authority in the US. And I was training people to repair systems at airports and air traffic control centers. As you can imagine, that's mission critical stuff right there. And so the CAA and National Air Traffic Services, whom I work for, they have the time and the money to do things right. And I was sent on the ITT course, which means Instructional Training Techniques, or it might have been Introduction to Training Techniques, but it was 3 weeks just as an introduction. Now, usually what happens is people will send you on a one day presentation skills class, or a half day, or a 2 day. This was 3 week introduction. And so I got a very good kind of grounding in basic techniques. And then my jobs after that were, I was a training manager, so I was recruiting, hiring trainers. In some cases, I was evaluating training that was bought in from other companies. And so I had, exposure to many different sides of the training equation. And then if we move that along a bit to when I was the worldwide community director for the Astris project, I curated AstriCon, where we might have up to 60 speakers for one event. And so I was also curating the content and giving speakers sort of hints and tips about how they could improve their sessions, as well as at the same time going and actually submitting potential speeches for other people's conferences. So I was both sides of the conference fence. And so really these 7 power presenting protocols of a distillation of many years of experience, of not only my own experience, where I might have made bad presentations here and good ones there, and knowing the difference, to actually observing a lot of things, just like that one I said when the guy shut down any kind of participation that there might have been in the one in Florida. I've seen so many things like that. I'll give you another one very quickly. I was in San Francisco just a couple of months ago for an event. The keynote speakers were Salesforce, and the closing keynote was OpenAI, the chat GPT people.
Oh, yeah.
Now, both of these were amazing presentations. Both invested serious money in very swanky slideware, and everything looked very glamorous and great. And yet both of them finished their sessions in the worst possible ending, which is, that's it, any questions? Terrible. Because as you know, John, from your own experience, whether it's a movie you've watched or a job that you've had, you tend to remember beginnings and endings. You remember the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie, but not necessarily everything in between. And so it is with presentations. And so the end of a presentation is a very, very powerful place to put your call to action, your main points, your logical next step, whatever it might be. So when you finish with, that's it, any questions, you're actually throwing the end of your presentation to the wind to see what might happen. And sure enough, I don't remember what happened on the Salesforce one, so I guess that was probably all right. But on the Chat GPT one, let's say there's 200 people in the audience. I don't know the exact number. The guy puts his hand up and says, I've been trying to work with Chat GPT through this API, hooking it up to this obscure piece of software that I don't remember. There then followed like a 10-minute conversation where 199 people weren't that interested. And, this guy was, because the guy who was delivering the talk was a bit of a techie. So he was, connected in talking about this stuff to the exclusion of everybody else. And what he should have done, of course, if he was a pro presenter, is say, that sounds amazingly interesting. But let me talk to you directly about that and solve any problems you might have right afterwards or later on, because we need to, we need to keep everybody together. And so my suggestion in the plan protocol is never, ever to finish on Q&A. By all means, handle questions either throughout the duration of the presentation, if you can, or reserve a little patch for it just before the end, but never end on it. You do the ending so that you can summarize or give the call to action or whatever it might be.
Exactly. No, Q&A sessions are always something that scares me or terrifies me, because you never know what questions you're going to get. And, you could totally discredit yourself if someone asks a question, and after you gave this amazing presentation, they ask a question that, someone in the audience is like, oh, you should know the answer to that. So being able to carefully, stick that landing of like, I don't really know, but I kind of do, but I'm not
You're,
just going to talk your ear off about nonsense. That's one point that I am always terrified about,
yeah, well,
just discrediting yourself over something like that.
yeah, you're bang on the money, John, and that's why you should never finish on Q&A. But you also raise an interesting point about how you deal with questions, and another one from the case files. This is not me.
Mhm.
This is something I saw somebody else do, and I've never forgotten it. I was doing some product presentations in Germany, and halfway through, this German man puts his hands up. I won't do the accent, and says, can your product do this particular feature? Now, the truth of the matter is, it couldn't. It didn't do that. But a colleague of mine jumped in and said, "Oh, why do you ask? Is it an important thing for your deployment?" And the guy said, "Not really. I just wondered." And so we
Yeah,
carried on because that question had been sort of deflated, and we didn't even
exactly.
answer the question because the guy had admitted, he wasn't really interested. It wasn't key to him. So off we carried on. And so one of the things I've learned is to always ask why the question has been asked, because if the person had said, well, actually, it's totally crucial, I can't use your product without it, I was like, goodness me, if it's that important, let's talk about it afterwards, where we can give you chapter and verse about that, even though
Mhm.
a chapter and verse might be no. But,
Yeah.
since the guy said, no, actually, I don't even know why I asked the question, I just, was wondering.
No, and that's something that was kind of eye-opening about reading the book, is that these aren't crazy outlandish ideas. It's almost like common sense, but it makes you actually think about it and implement it. Things like, think about your audience, planning out, even the way that you kind of deal or understand them. They're not, completely foreign concepts, but when you actually think about it and put them into the context of, public speaking and kind of implementing that, it really is kind of earth shattering. And that's really where, my eyes were kind of open to a lot of it. But I thought that was just one interesting note, that it's almost like you wrote a book on how to communicate with common sense. And that's that, not to say that they're not earth shattering and great points. It's because they are such simple basic things that we can be implementing, and easy tips that would so so much greater improve our ability to communicate in the techie world.
Yes, I think you're right. I wouldn't call anything in there revolutionary or earth shattering. But as with any walk of life, when you become a specialist in something, you've got so much of it in your head that if you're not careful, you're so close to it that you can't organize your thoughts in a way that other people can understand. And so what I've done there is use that same concept, because I see technical people do it all the time, that they can't quite get the right resolution, if you like, an organization when they come to impart their information. And I was conscious that it might be like that for me with presentation skills, because I've got it all up here. Can I
Mhm.
map it out? And so my challenge was to map it out into a framework, because frameworks make the brain work, and put it into a logical sequence in that framework that I thought would resonate with technical minds. And so
Mhm.
that was the challenge that I tried to rise to in writing the book.
No, absolutely fantastic, and I can't give it enough recommendations for our audience to check it out. My last question is just, what question have I yet to ask you? Or what else would you like to plug if you have anything coming up? Obviously, we
Well,
have ClueCon in
well, of course,
August,
we've
but
all got ClueCon coming up, haven't we?
yep,
Not too
exactly.
far away. August to the August the 4th to the 7th, and I enjoyed chatting with Luca not so long ago about ClueCon. At the
Mhm.
time, the call for papers hadn't ended, and so we still don't know who's specifically has been selected to speak. But I guess we'll come back to that and go through the program in more detail. But what we
Yep.
do know is that every ClueCon offers massive value, because it's by developers for developers. It's got all sorts of exciting technical sessions, and even for the non-technical people, there's always the maker challenge on day one. So that's definitely something to talk about. The other thing to say, John, is if people pick up the book and enjoy it and learn from it, and they want to go deeper, then I do run in-company masterclasses, or I'm available for people's conferences like sales kickoffs and team days and offsites. And usually in technical companies, these things are filled with product updates and, you know, AI landscapes and all that. And so it's nice for people to have a little something to break it up, an inspirational talk on communications. And that's something I love to do.
Definitely, and that's always one of my favorite parts of the conference is hearing your piece, because it's not technical down your throat and dry at all. Obviously, you make it engaging for the audience. So I appreciate you hopping on the call today, David. Thank you for a great episode.
Thanks very much, John. I appreciate you taking the time to read the book. Well done, that man.